In this section of notes, we're going to be looking at a few models. We're going to be looking at three different models: the concentric zone model, the sector model, the multiple nuclei model, and we're going to have some special guests. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. And then we're going to finish the day looking at kind of statistics within cities themselves with patterns of class, age, gender, race, and ethnicity. Hope you're ready. Internal cities. A second subfield of urban geography is the study of internal cities. Cities are often arranged in similar ways, allowing geographers to develop models for urban land use. These models are based on four things. Number one, accessibility. Space is accessible by inhabitants. Number two, high cost of accessible space, because the cost of land goes up in the city. Number three, transportation. Lines of transportation determine development. And number four, societal and cultural needs, such as economic competition. Number one, models of urban land use. There are three different models that help explain the different land uses within cities: the concentric zone model, Hoyt's sector model, and the multiple nuclei model. All of the models include a central business district, or CBD, and residential areas by various income levels of inhabitants. First one I want to look at is the concentric zone model. This was created in 1923 by E.W. Burgess. It views elites as growing outward from a central area in a series of concentric rings, much like the growth of trees. The size and width of the rings vary from city to city. Oh, looky here, somebody just walked in my room. I might let him introduce these ideas. It's Mr. Burgess himself.
My model has separate zones. Zone 1, the innermost zone, is the central business district, where non-residential activities are concentrated. Very few residences exist in this ring, and property costs are high in this ring.
Zone 2 is the zone in transition. This contains light industry and housing for the poor, and services as a transition zone between the businesses in the central business district and the more purely residential areas in the outer zones. Industries located in Zone 2 may be too large to fit in the relatively small Zone 1, or their owners may be seeking cheaper land. Zone 3. This zone contains working-class homes, modest older houses on small lots occupied by stable, working-class families. Housing here is less expensive than in the outer ring. Zone 4. As rings get further from the central business district, the homes get larger and more expensive. Zone 4 consists of middle-class residences, either single-family homes or high-rent apartments occupied by those wealthy enough to choose location and afford the higher cost of transportation into the central business district. Zone 5, a commuter's zone, the final ring. It's farthest away from the central business district. It is beyond the continuous built-up area of the city, and people live in small villages where they spend their leisure and sleep hours and commute into the central business district for work.
I was really lucky to have Mr. Burgess in my room, so I thought that I'd get him to kind of teach you about his model. His model is dynamic and it's ever-changing. As the inner rings grow larger, invading spaces of rings further out, those rings get smaller, in other words. Burgess explains that neighborhoods change through a process of invasion and secession, with seceding poorer inhabitants driving wealthier residents further away from the cities. In other words, as the inner rings get bigger, the outer rings get further out and get skinnier. The zones outside the core are sized according to what people will pay for land. This provided a way for urban residents to gradually move up economically and socially by allowing these people to progressively migrate away from the central business district. So it's kind of all a symbol of wealth as to how far outside the city or how far outside the central business district that you actually are able to get. The next model we're going to look at is the sector model. Land economist Homer Hoyt developed the sector model in 1939 as a variant of the concentric zone theory. According to Hoyt, the city develops in a series of sectors, not rings, as Burgess described. They may be determined by environmental factors, or they may develop by other factors. And what do you know? Mr. Hoyt himself.
I'm not like that Mr. Burgess. My model actually makes sense. I do understand that as the city grows, residential areas that were once occupied by the wealthy, quote, filter down to the middle class. The overall pattern of land does not reflect unbroken circles, like Burgess suggests. Once a district is established for industry, other industries will cluster around it, creating a wedge.
Man, I don't think y'all realize how lucky y'all are having these experts come and talk to y'all. Hoyt's sector model is accurate in explaining the growth of numerous industrial cities in Great Britain. If Hoyt's model was futuristic, you could replace the transportation sector of the model with a high-speed rail line. That would be kind of your bluish areas in this picture of the Hoyt sector model. In North American city structure, members of low-income groups tend to live in linear residential areas radiating from the city center outwards. And you can kind of see that here in your green, but it's not pointed out enough. Radiating outwards your low-class residential areas. The next model I want to look at is the multiple-nuclei model. The concentric zone and Hoyt's sector model both assume that urban growth and development occurs outward from a single central business district, which originally had been the site of the very first settlement. The multiple-nuclei model, developed in 1945 by geographers C.D. Harris and E.L. Ullman, counters that, and, oh, by the way, here they are. Let's see what they have to say.
Large cities develop by spreading from several nodes of growth, not just one. Individual nodes usually have special functions like ports, neighborhood businesses, universities, or airports.
This model explains that incompatible land use activities do not cluster in the same locations, so the nodes influence the type of development that occurs around them.
And I thank both of those gentlemen for speaking, even though one of them voice was a little high. One thing to keep in mind here is that clusters expand as the cities grow. They don't necessarily stay as small as they are; they'll get bigger. But the multiple nuclei model is just that. It's not. You don't have just one central business district. You have other ones that develop within the cities themselves. These three models help to explain not only land use in cities, but also the different social characteristics of people that live in particular areas of the city, which is where we'll be kind of moving next in our notes. And then lastly today, what I want to look at is patterns of class, age, gender, race, and ethnicity. Urban areas in the United States are divided into what is known as census tracts. These are areas of approximately 5,000 people that correspond, whenever possible, to neighborhood boundaries. First thing I want to look at is social class. This is income, education, and occupation. Higher social class means that you live in a bigger house and probably further away from the lower economic performing people. Letter B, age and marital status. Younger families live farther from the city center. Young professionals, unmarried or without children, live close to the city center. Then we have gender. There's an increasing number of one-parent families. Generally, these families are poorer because they're working in the lower paying jobs, because a lot of times the one-parent family is being run by the woman. She's the one parent, and women generally get paid less. This trend is known as feminization poverty, basically the idea that the number of one-parent families is growing, and generally you have women being that one parent, and they don't make as much money a lot of times. And that's increasing in the world and increasing in neighborhoods. And then race and ethnicity. In many American cities, Black, African Americans, and Latinos are segregated into nuclear communities that are frequently among the most undesirable neighborhoods. These are known as ghettos.